treat others. And as Nana is speaking, there are two questions I would want all of us to reflect on as she gives her experiences. What does your organization do to build real trust? And what might your organization be doing that could harm trust without meaning to? So what does your organization do to build real trust? And what might your organization be doing that could harm trust without meaning to? We are nice people, so we didn't think you would do it intentionally, right? So let's have these questions at the back of our minds as we welcome Nana's input. Nana, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Charles. I want to start with, went to some part in the northern region to work with women on women's economic empowerment. And in that space where they were working, in the communities where they were working, they felt that looking at the best way to support the women was to support them through chicken rearing, so that they would be able to, rear these chicken, sell them, and then get money to look after their families. And so, they, told the women that this is what they were going to do. And the women said, well, fine. So they went ahead, bought, many small chicks, and for, very many months, nobody was coming for the chicks. So they had to go back to the community to ask why. And they found out that, one, in their community, they actually don't eat chicken. They only use chicks or fowls for traditional ceremonies. And those traditional ceremonies, they are very specific, and there's a specific color of fowl. It should be plain. The color should be either all white or all brown. You don't have mixed. And here they are going to buy all these speckled, feathered chicks. And so, as my friend said, I don't want to tell you what happened. Nobody came for them. I don't want to tell you what happened to the chicks. So, I think for many of us, that is what happens when we work in communities. And some of us were talking about how communities should own and be a part of whatever it is, whatever intervention it is. That is where the trust counts. Because it's theirs, it's their project. You are just there to support them to do what it is that they want to do. But what do we find for many of us in the work that we do? Very often, we have these donor compliance frameworks that we use to intervene in communities. We have log frames, we have certain KPIs, we have accountability, monitoring and evaluation systems that we have, and we take these to the communities. And instead of using the indigenous methods and methodologies of the communities, because I tell you, our communities have monitoring and evaluation frameworks. They have ways of communicating. They have systems, but we don't take the time. And very often, because in any case, the grants that we are getting are not even giving us that time. We don't take the time to really engage, to understand the context and understand the knowledge that the community brings. There are the ways of working that can enable us to, be connected with the community. Because community development did not start with NGOs. It started before colonialism. We were doing philanthropy. I always say that for Africans, for philanthropy, we don't do philanthropy, we are philanthropy. Philanthropy is being for us, not just doing. And so we already have these embedded within our communities. But because of the current development system that we have, we don't, value these indigenous methods, knowledge, methodologies, and engage them in the way we work with our communities. And communities could be communities as in you've gone to one country, you are working in particular communities, districts. It could be also, depending on, for an organization like WAXI, it is civil society in West Africa. That is our community. How much have we really engaged in understanding how we want to work? So these are some of the ways. I think that for us as Africans, there's one thing that is important. For us, when we talk about the Ubuntu philosophy, it is about interdependence. It is about solidarity building. And the fact that if I'm going to thrive and survive, you have to thrive and survive because we are connected. And yet, we have become this very individualized, siloed mentality way of working, where it's about us and about, portraying our value and not really ensuring that the ecosystem and everybody else that is around us is also thriving, because that is how we thrive. And one of the reasons why we have what we have that today is because of all of us are looking at these resources that we are getting from grants, and we have to compete to get those resources. So instead of collaborating, working in a communal system, which is the way Africans work and really get value, we have become competitive and not working with each other. And those are some of the ways. If we want to build trust, we have to be able to open up to each other and collaborate more and learn more and be able to be vulnerable with each other and not fear that if I open up my vulnerability to you, you are going to go to the funder and tell the funder about my vulnerability because you want to get that funding. So we actually don't trust each other, even in our work and the way we work. So those are some of the things that if we are thinking about a radical transformation, where we are going to be focusing on getting our own resources, working together, and resourcing here is not just the money, it's also the social capital. It's also, what it is, the knowledge that we bring to support each other. And I think the radical thinking, the radical change that must happen, must also happen from us and our own mindsets and the way we work in this space. We have to change the way we engage and the way, of course, we work with the different communities that we engage with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nana, for that. I think you raised some very important issues. Of course, the challenge that we always have with the compliance issues with our log frames, which become a serious entanglement to the work we do. Spend a lot of time being accountable to our donor partners more than those that we are supposedly serving. And then you raised the issue of us looking within, that we have the solutions already. Indigenous methods, and that there are indigenous methods of doing many of the things that we are doing, of communicating, M&E, governance, but it seems we do not value those methods. And the fact that we are philanthropy, and I love that. You said for us, philanthropy is being and not just doing. And I think this is something that we can all connect to. We are philanthropy, we are giving. Giving is who we are as Africans. And then you raised the issue of solidarity, that if we really want to transform the ecosystem, we really want to reimagine this ecosystem in a radical way, we need to go back to our communal values and be more collaborative. So the idea of collaborative advantage and not competitive advantage, and then also move away from working in silos. So Nana, thank you so much for that, for your input. So now we have our other colleague, Grace Mayangi. I hope I pronounced it right, because I always call you Grace. Mayangi, okay, from the Kenyan Community Development Foundation. And she's going to focus on legitimacy through community power, who holds the decision-making space. So Grace is going to share some of the lessons that they've picked up from doing their work in Kenya. But as she's sharing these lessons, I think it would be good for us to reflect on two questions. Who really has the power in your work? And how could you share that power more intentionally? So who really has the power in your work, and how could you share that power more intentionally? So Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Charles. And allow me to pick up from where Nana dropped off in terms of radical thinking. Someone once challenged us at KCDF that how could we be in conversations around reimagining the ecosystem when we were part of the problem. So us being part of the problem in terms of non-governmental, not-for-profit, civil society organizations, that we are part of the problem. And I remember, like much of the provocation we had earlier, you think about it and then you say it's too much to think about. Being asked, are we part of the problem? It came up from a survey, and Nana has invited us to be vulnerable. We had done a survey in terms of the partners we work with as KCDF, and we were assessing the satisfaction. And let's just say, yeah, it was a sobering moment, because we thought we were doing good work, in terms of the grant support we're giving, we work with, not for, we have all the bright buzzwords. But what we got back from our partners, they didn't see us as partners. They saw us as funders. And, it made us sit up and say, oh, there's something we're fundamentally doing wrong. Because all our value is in the dollar or Kenya shilling or Rwandese franc in terms of the partnership. So what does that lead me to? The conversation and where we place money in the power conversation. Do we value money more than partnership, more than collaboration, more than an opportunity to share ideas? So you might find I'm a bit all over the place because I had planned what I was going to say, and then Brian spoke. And I said, okay, I need to recalibrate. So in our reflection as KCDF, we started questioning how we do our work and how can we, instead of just keeping saying it as a buzzword, but how could we really be seen as partners? Would we be seen as partners if we took money off the table? If we didn't give grants, would these organizations want to work with us? Okay, yeah, that's a painful one, isn't it? And we've had recently that lesson because we were getting funds from USAID, and that funding went down. Or not went down, sorry, it went, it's finished. And let me give you a reflection of what we saw on Kenya X Space, formerly Twitter Space. So of course, there was, yes, the concern about issues around healthcare, so on and so forth. But for those of you who know Kenya Twitter Space, we quickly go to the dark side. And the comments were, good for these NGOs, them and their big cars, them and their big salaries. It serves them right. Who do they work for? And the threads went on and on and on and on. And we said we need to call ourselves to a meeting and really ask ourselves, who are we working for? If we are saying we work for communities, and I remember I posed this question to Charles because I've had it in other spaces, it's not my original thought. But ask yourself, your organization where you work or whatever you do, okay, God forbid, we're in Africa we don't talk about death, but God forbid you died today, or your organization died today, who would mourn for you? Who would come for your funeral? Are you with me? Who would come for your funeral? Who would feel the pain that you're no longer there? Is it the communities we serve? Will they say, oh my, it really was doing such great work, they were our partner? Or will they continue, flip the obituaries page and continue? And so I think what we are being invited to, from conversations, and a lot of us go for conferences and we say we are tired of the talk shop. I think we are being invited to actually, as much as we are the ones who want to fix the system, Sometimes we might not be the right people, but we might have the good intentions, but we are being invited to have a conversation of serious reflection. Who do we exist for? So you can ask yourself, in the last 4 months, how many of your reports went to the communities you serve in a way that they understand and they appreciate, vis-a-vis how many reports went to the people who give you money? Okay? So in our tweets, in our Instagram posts, who were they honestly directed towards? So I'm talking I'm also a perpetrator, okay? Because I have an obsession, where is our logo being placed, you know? And we were having internal conversations, I remember, you know, within our organization. And some of our founding members were saying, why are your logo now is everywhere? What's that all about? Is it about you, us, or is it about the communities? And how much money the communities have put towards the work? Whether it's cash or in kind. Isn't that what should be most important? So of course, you know, with our big English, we're explaining about, you know, product placement, all those methodologies, marketing, and, you know, this is how you do fundraising. But again, we were asked, who do you do this work for? Is it about you? Of course, as I sat there, I was, you know, holding my hands under my, you know, and saying, these people, they want me not to have a job, eh? You know? But I think as the more we think about where we live, we honestly need to start thinking about or creating spaces for these very painful conversations. If we do not change how we're working, as we were told, if there is no funding, will you continue doing the work you're doing, or will you close shop? So, okay, it's not all doom and gloom. So let me go back to what Charles asked me to speak about. One of the key things that we've tried to focus on is recognizing the resources that communities have and putting a value, a monetary value to what they bring to the table. So this is around, for those of you who know KCDF's work, it's actually a very unpopular, to some people, very unpopular program called match funding. So what does this look like? A community will say we want to rehabilitate, for instance, a classroom that is dilapidated. You know, they want to be able to refurbish it, so on and so forth, and we'll say, great, we want to support you in that work. What are you able to bring to the table? So they'll say, you know, we have a parent, for instance, in the school who's willing to contribute as a quantity surveyor, and they'll give this amount of time. And so what we do is that we cost that. How much is it in a Kenya shilling value? And then we endeavor to look for a funder who is willing to match that work. So what happens is that the ownership really is at the community level, because the funder only comes in to match whatever the community has raised, and it is not a project that the funder is dictating should happen, but the community independently identifies that. We come in and we're telling communities, move this here, you should be doing it like this, and this is the better way. It's not to say that we have nothing to bring to the table, but everything we bring to the table, we must bring it with the appreciation that there is knowledge we have, but there's also knowledge communities have. And they are the experts in terms of what is happening at the local level, not us. We must come to the conversation with humility, because they are allowing us to partner with them. So where is our humility? Where is our recognition of their expertise and their knowledge? And finally, if our accountability is more to the person who gives us the money, we are then back into the trap that money is more powerful than our knowledge, our experience, our stories. And you always know the disparity of money. There are those who will have more than you, isn't it? So aren't we then further propagating this misconception or a really uplifting of money? So I invite you, like ourselves, continuous reflection. How do we do better? Now that we know better,
How do we do better? Thank you so much.
Very important insights. I think you started from a point of vulnerability where you shared with us the results of the partner survey. I dare say if a lot of us are doing that, we probably get the same responses. I think you highlighted a lot on the fact that our communities or our partners may not see us the way we see ourselves. And in your case, you realize that they have more of a funding relationship with you instead of a mutually kind of beneficial partnership. Then you asked about very important things, including whether we value money more than partnerships. And then you also shared the story of what happened on the X space, where citizens were questioning who we work for. So when there was the USAID disruption, stop work orders. And then you asked a very important question. So if our organizations die, not that they are going to die, but if they do, who will mourn with us? And I can also reframe it as, and Nana also kind of reframes it to us and says, if our organization is under attack, who will come and support you? Who would tell the government or whoever, state actor, that this is our organization? And then you asked the question, who do we exist for? And then you said it's important that we create these kind of spaces for hard and painful conversations, which was really insightful, about communities raising funds and the funder coming in to support. But for me, I think the most important thing you said at the end was that we need to engage with these issues with humility and recognition that the communities that we work with have expertise, have knowledge, have skills that we need to also value. So our next panel member, this is going to be a tag team. So they decided that they will come in twos, which is really nice. So we have Kira Zimmerman, who's the program specialist at Global Giving. She's a program specialist for disaster response. And then Jonathan Musangwa, who is the legal lead at Human Rights First Rwanda Association. So they're going to talk about resilience through shared power. So they're going to look at the role of donors and intermediaries. And as they are sharing their insights and the kind of relationship that they have, one of the things we could think about through a question is, what changes can help donors and intermediaries create space for CSOs or nonprofits to really listen, adapt, and lead with the communities they serve? So you're warmly welcome, Kira and Jonathan.
A ton of time to practice together, but I'm starting to believe that magic was in the room, because so much of what you've said segues so beautifully to what I've been thinking. And I had many more notes planned, and after the speakers this morning, I sort of scratched a bunch of them out. Again, my name is Kira Zimmerman. I'm a program specialist at Global Giving. It's really an honor to be with you all today. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank a dear colleague of mine, Maggie Leahy, who was actually supposed to be with us, but due to medical issues couldn't attend, and I'm so privileged to be here in her stead and trusted by all of you and by her as well. I will be brief, but I do think it's important to go back to the origins of Global Giving, the organization I work for, to understand how we think about community-led and how we think about resilience and community-built resilience. So Global Giving was founded in 2002 with the mission to accelerate community-led change and to transform the aid and philanthropy sector. So very small goals for a new organization. And over the last about 23 years, we have worked with thousands of nonprofit partners who are now in our network, as well as hundreds of thousands of individual donors, institutions, high net worth donors, and corporations, to essentially be a connector, to try to connect organizations who are on the front lines of doing the work in their community with donors who care and want to give to those causes. And so, based off of what I've said, you can probably see how we're sort of in between it all, right? That intermediary. We are a nonprofit funder, and we take that role really seriously because we are, supporting, for example, donors in navigating risk and compliance and all of the jargon, the words that you hear, but we're also trying to support nonprofit partners not only in accessing funding, but being able to strengthen their digital marketing skills and advertise the work that they're doing. And sort of that profile of who we are makes us such that we want to be an intermediary that isn't only moving money. We want to be more than that. And because our mission is to transform the aid and philanthropy sector and to accelerate community-led change, we also think about resilience based off of that foundation. I think a really strong bridge for building trust, because I'm seeing you for the expertise you have, the strengths that you have, the knowledge that you have, the reach that you have, and that's a really great way to then think about how can we work on resilience from there as peers, as a community. And so at Global Giving, when we talk about resilience, we talk about it as not like how can an organization bounce back when a crisis has happened. We think about resilience as how can we, or taking a step back, not also, we will externally come in and make you resilient. It is more about how can we ensure that community partners that we work with retain the power, the dignity, the autonomy that they have in the decision-making role to keep doing what they're doing. And so, of course, part of that is getting flexible funding to our partners to do that work. But part of it is how can we stretch ourselves to be greater advocates? Because we are in the middle, right? We are an intermediary. So can we push our corporate partners to stop asking for so many metrics? Can we ourselves stop asking for so many metrics? I always say that whenever we tell our partners you don't have to report back to us, like at all, I then get an email with 6 pages of a PDF being like, this is what we did in this district, this is what we did in this district. And I'm always saying that there is a desire for that mutual accountability and trust, so the information will probably flow back anyways. And so when we think about going back to resilience, we're just really, really committed to essentially saying, how can we support what is already there? How can we focus on thinking about the strengths and the strength-based foundation that any partner of ours has? And how can we continue to move aside? So where can we shift, as everybody likes to say, shift power? So where can our partners be making the decisions, and do they feel safe? Do they feel safe in our network to give us that critical feedback? And for several workshops, which we paid them for because it was their time and their expertise, and we said, how would you tell us how we can make a decision about what regions to focus on or what crises to focus on and what would be important when selecting grantees? And again, as an intermediary, as a funder, there are power dynamics, of course, baked into so much, everything of what we do, and so I don't want to negate that. But this experience of that co-creation has steered the course of this fund for the last 3 years. And we've even gone back to share with the community leaders, hey, this is the latest that's happened. Here are the latest grantees we've selected. Do you have any new feedback based off of what's happening in the world on how we can adapt? And so I think there's so much that we're still learning, and there are a lot of mistakes that we continue to make, and I'm thinking so much about what Brian said about how the actions that we take, I'm poorly paraphrasing, don't tell him, but some of the actions that we take, while with positive intent, they don't that doesn't mean that their transformative value is the same. And I think that the actions we take at Global Giving we're always striving for, at minimum, the positive intent with centering community-led at the center of it, at the core of it. But I'm thinking out loud now about how I want to continue through this conference with all of you to really challenge myself so I can return back with my peers and say, how are we, great, these are some of the good things that we're doing. Here's how we're thinking about community-led resilience and supporting the strengths that are already there. But how can we be really more transformative, and how are we perpetuating the systems that are there that are not working, and what are the ways that we can change them in this unique role that we have as an intermediary and as a funder. So I want to thank the partners that are here. There are some Global Giving partners in the room, some on this panel with me. And with that, I'd love to pass it over to you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you very much, Kyra, for great insights. So, I'm Jonathan Musangwa. Let me start with the problem and why change is needed. First of all, I may say that in traditional funding system, donors most often set priorities, timelines, and metrics with zero room for local voices. And this creates imbalances where non-profit organizations feel they must meet donors' expectations instead of community needs. Also, there is a pressure to report on successes instead of learning our failures, because that failures may happen. Also, the resilience become reactive instead of proactive. So that was so on the perspective of what shared powers may look like, I may break down them into 4 areas, where first of all should be based on flexible funding. When there is a flexible funding, it also allows organizations to be responsible to unexpected challenges, to take strategic risks, and to invest in long-term impact rather than short-term outputs. It also, when funding is flexible, organizations can shift from when emergence arises, strengthen internal systems, or pilot new approaches rooted in lived realities that we face within the community. Or in short time, talking about funding flexibility, funding builds resilience. So for the second layer, there should be listening and co-creation. In listening and co-creation, you will find that communities are not just beneficiaries. They should be the best architects of their own future. Also, when donors and intermediaries take time to listen and cooperate with grassroots actors, the solution will become more grounded, more innovative, and more sustainable. And that should be our priority. And this shared power means asking, not assuming, which means that community members shape strategy, not just carrying it out. So, by concluding this, co-creation is how we ensure the resilience is owned, not how it is imposed. For the third layer, there should be mutual accountability. When talking about mutual accountability, there is traditional models often emphasize on reporting up to donors, measuring successes through predetermined indicators, but mutual accountability reframes this. It's about shared learning, honest reflection, and corrective growth. And it would also be the change to empower organizations to be transparent without fear of losing support. from donors. And the first one should be holistic support. When talking about holistic support, first of all, it builds resilience and tell us that resilience is not just about programs. It should also be about people that we are serving. It could be also taken when true support in this view, when true support must not taken and in agreements, must go beyond agreements. Where donors provide this kind of holistic support, they may help to create a more sustainable and human centered ecosystem. I may end up by sharing an idea, an experience from the organization that I'm working with. So back in the years, our organization launched, it was a campaign to raise awareness about legal rights for marginalized communities. From that time, we faced a lot of resistance because it was a long-term project. But one of our donors, partner, did something different. So instead of pushing for short-term results, they gave us a room to adapt and our approach and speak openly to our community about risk and work with grassroots leaders and hence the parties concerned. So that created, because of that trust, we reached to deeper communities, we formed the stronger alliances, and we are anticipating for positive results, which will be policy reforms. So I may conclude by saying that power can look like, shared power can look like, it's not just the shared power, it's not just about funding, it should also be about standing together. Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Kira and Jonathan. So Kira kick-started the conversation, just giving us a background about global giving and their reason why they were set up to transform the philanthropic and development sector, but going beyond that to support the organizations with digital resilience skills and other types of capacity that is needed. And then she then spoke a lot about the importance of also their flexible, unrestricted funding, and the fact that they do not expect their partners to report back, but they still keep on getting reports. That was interesting. And I think one of the things that she talked about, which I thought was really interesting that we should take note of, is that they helped to launch funds. So they launched this fund called a Hope in Crisis Fund. I think that's for overlooked and underfunded communities. But what they did, which I thought was really good, was they used a participatory kind of grant-making approach where they invited the partners who were probably going to be the beneficiaries or of this fund to really determine the criteria and who should access that fund. And then she ended by saying, and I think it's a rehash of what our senior brother Brian Kagoro said. He said, good intent is not good enough, but the question is, how can we be more transformative? And then our colleague Jonathan from the Human Rights First Rwanda Association shared with us, the kind of challenges that we have as local partners or as national, subnational organizations. Usually we work within a framework where their priorities are set, timelines are set. Sometimes they say co-creation, but it's not from conception, it's co-creation from implementation. So the framework is already set. There's pressure to meet donor expectations. There's a lot of pressure on documenting success. Nobody's really interested in the failure stories and learning from failure. And then, so we've become very reactive always responding after the fact, and not being proactive and being futuristic, and really setting in place strategies to respond to what is coming. But he also highlighted on, I think, very important things, the importance of flexible funding, and that cannot be overstated, and the importance of listening, that we need to listen so that we can have more grounded and more sustainable solutions, the importance of mutual accountability, holistic support, and the fact that as we have these partnerships, and I think you're speaking here to our colleagues from the global minority, is that the support must go beyond agreements, and that shared power is not just about funding, right? So thank you so much, Jonathan, for that, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we can open up the space for contributions and questions. Where is Susan? How long do we have? Oh, yeah, here. Okay. Okay, we have 15 minutes. So, yes, so I guess you helped me. Okay, so, yes, I think we can go from, yes, with the green, yes, you.
My name is Mona Lisa Kintole. I work with and for gender and trans persons, gender diverse and transgender persons at the Ugandan National Trans Forum. I really like the topic, to be honest, right? But I also have a feeling that my community, where I come from, we really approach this question of trust with a little faith, because of the way that we have been marginalized and not trusted, and also because of the capacity deficit syndrome. So when you're approaching trans and gender diverse persons, you think you are there to save them. So my question is this, and I don't know if it's one or two. Can you please help me cite examples, especially when you spoke about collaboration, and yet most of the funding that I see going out from my reflective space is it's really theme-tied, right? There are women that are working on ABC issues, and so there is no space to collaborate. And even as within these communities, we want to think of ourselves as we are working on unique issues. And I'm always asking myself, what are those unique issues that we always speak about? And I think this is something that you said opened my eyes to say that when HIV funding did go, I realized that our issues are really interconnected, right? And so please help me cite examples on where we can work more collaboratively with each other rather than the siloed way of working that we practice now. I know of it to be very performative collaboration for the donors. And then my other question is around, yes, really, I think moving forward in 2025 is that we collaborate more now because we are forced to collaborate, not because I want to work with you. And I know it for a fact, because as a trans and gender diverse person, I know of organizations that have come to us because a donor X forced them to. And so there is no mutual ground to which we are collaborating apart from reporting back to the donors. So then how are we able, as the people in this room, because maybe you will collaborate with me moving forward intentionally, do this work where we are doing it for the people and not just to report back to the donors.
Grace, for talking about the competition and collaboration. When you talk about the competition, maybe if you can help us to understand why this competition, what are the main routes leading to the competition? Because we all recognize how the competition is affecting that trust we are talking about, affecting the power in the community, but also within the stakeholders. In my understanding, one of the aspects is that when the process fails to include everyone, then we need to compete for our own right, for our own resources, for our own spaces, for our own. I used to tell people that we had no reason to have maybe a standing alone organization of women with disabilities if the other movement of women, if the other disability movement was inclusive. maybe we could have standing for strengthening the existing intervention to be inclusive rather than standing alone as an organization. So one of the aspects of this competition is that the process is failing to include everyone. Including everyone is also taking into consideration the needs of everyone, responding to the needs of everyone. So as you talked about the competition, what are also the practical steps that we can undertake to make sure that we are collaborating and we are making sure that everyone is on the table? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Peter from Rwanda. I work with African New Life Ministries. I would like to understand what the House says, or the panelists are saying about resilience, planning for resilience, not on the side of the final beneficiary, but also on the part of the intermediaries. How do you stand on your own when the source of funding has stopped? It is very common to receive donation, but such a donation will not allow you to invest, to make profits, so that you're able to wean yourself from any other funding. We have seen USAID cut. How are those intermediaries standing? So what does that tell us now? Can we think of endowment funding, profit-making investment, or they limit here and say, no, you're a non-profit, so don't go in that area?
Answer to the question you asked, my dear colleague in this space. We have to have our own funding, because restricted funding would always restrict us. So we have to, if we want to be agile, to be responsive, to collaborate with who we want to collaborate with, to respond to the issues that we believe are important for the communities that we work with and are a part of, we have to have our own resourcing. And it's connected to your last question. So we need unrestricted funding. How do we get that? Yes, there are some donors that are willing, a few of them, even with all the crisis happening, we don't have many donors that are really giving unrestricted funding. Some donors, but I think we have to change from that dependence on donors. We can have unrestricted funding from donors, but as non-profit organizations who are working in this space, there are a number of things I think we need to be looking at. Yes, endowments are one, and it's not easy getting the seed money even to start endowments, but we have to start looking at that. It's challenging for us because it's not a culture that we have developed. Giving is part of the life of Africans. We give, but we have not developed a culture where our giving goes towards organizations like ours. It would go to friends, it will go to family, it will go to religious institutions. Our diaspora and the remittances that they give is more than the official development assistance that we get in Africa. The money that is going out of Africa through illicit financial flows is in trillions. We have money on our continent. So it's about how we get that funding and resourcing, and I'm talking finances now, to be channeled also towards the development initiatives that we are a part of. And that feeds back to our original discussion about trust and how communities and our own people are a part of what we are doing. So if we are doing crowdfunding now, the organization, are we going to get people supporting or donating towards the cause? Do they feel that they have an interest in what it is that we are doing? So we have to think of new mechanisms. We have to think of blended financing. You should have been in the master class that we had yesterday. There was a lot of discussion around that blended financing, impact investment, social enterprises. So this is new for many of us. So what it means is that we have to build our knowledge and skill and really start looking at other avenues for financing and resourcing. And financing, the money is one, but there are also other ways of resourcing. So human resources, volunteering. How are we getting already in the African philanthropy? We give our time. How are we thinking of that creatively to support our institutions? How are we also thinking of cutting down our own costs? So for example, do you need an office for your operations, a big office? You may not. You could perhaps share resources. Could we think of some of those things? Could we, there are so many. I think what has to happen is we really have to break out of the mold of being tied to grant funding. Like, when they are training elephants, those who use elephants, they tie them when they are very small to a string and they can't move. And even when they become so big and they can just do this and tear the thread, they still can't because they feel tied. That's how we have become. And we have to break out of that mold. And I think also the organic movements. Before we started all this NGO business, there were student movements, there were political movements, there were several movements in our space doing, bringing about change. How were they resourcing themselves? Can we go back to those things and get new ways of getting things done? Thank you.
You asked the question, you also answered it. Because if we ask ourselves, how is it that a system has been created for us to be helping people, but we're in competition with each other? It's an oxymoron. And leaning on what Nana is saying is that we really need to have the space and the opportunity to think through who we are, why do we exist, and are we existing to continue perpetuating a problem? There's a friend of mine who's not in this space, works in different things, and she asked me a question I couldn't answer. Because she asked me, you're in development. There's so many development organizations since God knows when. This development is never getting developed. Are things never improving? And even I remember, even when there's a book that has been written about how KCDF was being formed, the feeling was that there was a lot of money for development, but it wasn't reaching where it needed to reach. And so problems were still there year in, year out. But if you read that book and remove the year, it can seem as if it's telling the story of today. So why do we exist? And who has made us exist in a way whereby we compete with each other? That we put problems in silos, very neat buckets, as if you're only dealing with disability, as you said, it's women with disability, as if women with disability do not have livelihood issues, do not have issues that are around, domestic violence, so on and so forth. So, sorry, more questions to us rather than answers. But on the issue of our own funding and how we need to, what Nana hasn't spoken about is they're part of reimagining INGOs, Ringo. And we must also reimagine ourselves, as she has said, and invited us to get out of the mold. So let me embarrass us. How many of us are currently giving towards a not-for-profit organization or not-for-profit work? How many of us? Oh, okay. What? Actually, I didn't think there would be so many hands. So maybe my point has not. Okay. So for those of us who are sitting next to somebody who's not giving, let's feel the shame. We're in this sector, but we don't even believe in our own sector to give towards it. So I invite you to, let me give you very hard homework. Go back to your organization and introduce a conversation around payroll giving. Because we work for these organizations, isn't it? Do we not believe in the work that we would give part of our pay towards it? there's a Kiswahili saying, haba na haba hujaza kibaba. Little feel I've butchered it. You know, we've made it about big money, our big. We must remove ourselves from this industry that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I was in high school, one of my teachers told me, stealing is a sin, but there is no dignity in begging as well. And I feel like philanthropy has been seen as we're begging. So my question to Grace directly is how KCDF is putting dignity in front of the work you do. That is to say, because you just said what your partners don't see you as partners, which in my head now I'm thinking you're not treating them with dignity enough for them to feel as if they're your partners. That's my question. And then one question to...
Please, only one.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
To Kaya, right?
Yes, Kira.
You do participate in grant making, right? So how do you make sure to, you know, because normally the narrative of grantees are we need to document things, you know, all of these restrictions and things. So how do you train your grantees that, okay, we do not require this, other than just telling them through emails? Do you have consultations and build their capacities and their mindset? Because changing their mindset also is important regarding the work you do. Thank you.
Peace. Now I'm wondering whether I should have said some of the things I said. But you know, that's on a light note. But yes, the question. Okay, how do we? Please, sorry. I'm very honest. I've forgotten the question.
No, he was saying that. Does it mean that your partners feel they're not treating them with dignity?
I think there's more of a focus or a value put on money, rather than the partnership, rather than what are we doing, the relationship exactly, rather than what are we doing together. And one of the things we are trying to ask ourselves, would organization X or community Y or individual Z still want to work with us if there was no money on the table? Because then it means it's a very transactional relationship. And we are also asking that of ourselves when it comes to the people who fund us. We're asking ourselves, are these people to be in good company with? Would we be willing to work and talk and be with these people if they were not giving us money? So always asking ourselves around that. But one of the key things that, and someone told me, you can only say that because you're in a position of privilege, is we have had to say no to certain funding. Because funding has come, a private sector partner, for instance, has come, apologies to all private sector partners, has come and said, we want to do X in this manner, in this particular area. So find us a community to work with. And when we went back and told them, what you want to do, it's great, but it's not great for this area. And when we've talked with our partners at the local level, they've said they would rather your funding does this. And I remember the private sector partner was like, I don't think you understood what we're telling you. We're giving you money, and we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me tell you, I wasn't at the organization at that time, but my colleagues say that it was very painful. It was a very painful conversation to have. And to just, you know how you say no without saying no, but you extricate yourself because you don't want to burn that, you never burn bridges. But they had to do that. But when I spoke about this somewhere and someone said, yeah, it's because you can say no because you have other funding or X, Y, Z. And so that also triggered me because I was like, wow, okay. Others may not have the luxury. But it goes back to, why are we putting ourselves in a position of begging? What are the things we're bringing to the table that should also have, if not more value than money? And we're learning this from an organization in Indonesia, not in Nepal. They have a program whereby the women, and I hope I get this right, the women in the area contribute. Every day the women put aside 1 rupee to go towards the work of the organization. So this organization gets local funding from the women in the community because the women value the work that organization does. But it also receives international funding. But they celebrate more the women who give the 1 rupee every day than the international funders. And they actually have meetings with the ladies who have given the money and tell them this is what we did, and they have their names up in a plaque, really to demonstrate that this is, it's okay, there's good and better money. This is better money. Why is it better money? Because of the sacrifice those women have done to give. It's not, some people can write big checks with many zeros, but these women are willingly sacrificing. So they have amplified that. But I hope that inspires us to continuously keep on questioning ourselves. But for the avoidance of doubt, so that I don't lose my job, I trust we treat our partners with dignity. And our partners who are here in the room, I know that I've seen one. Please confirm we treat you with dignity.
The mentality of not needing to report back, was that the question? Okay. Yeah, so we repeat over and over again that they don't need to report back to us. And I want to be clear that it's not on all funding, okay? So, for example, we mostly, through at least our disaster response grants, give flexible funding with no reporting and no proposal required, because our thought is, if you are responding to a mass displacement of people, or a tornado has just hit your community, or there has been an earthquake, you do not have time to sit at your computer and write 12 paragraphs. Oh, we distributed food in this community, or oh, we helped these people access shelter in this community, right? With some of our longer term, what we call structured grants, we do have a small level of reporting, and part of that, right, is the accountability piece, not as much to us as the intermediary, but to the donors who give. And so what I wanted to say that you reminded me of, Grace, about the Nepalese example was that, and Jonathan can attest to this, when you have an active project on global giving where you can share about the work you're doing and fundraise, every 3 months you are required, it's built into our system, to at least have a couple of sentences like a report, even if the report is, nobody has donated to us, this is a problem for us, and this is what we would do if you would donate. And part of the reason that the system is set up in that way is because, right, it's the individual donors who are giving the $5, the $3, that deeply care about the work. They are the ones like really wanting to hear, and they're the ones that are really wanting to give more. For us as an intermediary, if we're asking for the burdensome reporting, it is certainly, I'm gonna say, I think it is really harmfully perpetuating the power dynamics that are at play. It's not demonstrating trust, again, in our opinion. And so when it comes to the mentality shift, a lot of it is just really demonstrating that we mean what we say, which is, we're not in 3 months gonna say, gotcha, actually, you need to submit a report to us. We're not gonna follow up and ask. We may follow up and ask if we want to give again and we haven't heard anything. We say, hey, just like a 1 or 2 sentence update. But most of the time we really try to reinforce that practice by demonstrating that that's really what we mean. We really mean it when we say you don't need to report back to us. And if you are reporting, it's usually because it's the individual donors who are maybe contributing from, I don't know, they're donating from Barbados to your project because they care about your project and they really want to know and they want to learn from.
Thank you so much, Nana, Jonathan, Grace, and Kira, for that. Those were really insightful. But I would just want to invite Susan.
It's not enough to have said you want to do this differently, and we want to wax for now because we're time constrained. So allow me to be a benevolent dictator and determine where you will go. All right? So we shall have 2 groups on each side. So you'll see some flip chart and markers. All right? And so what I'm going to ask is, I will smack in the middle here and dividing lady in blue at the back corner. Wait, yes, you? Yeah, that lane. Okay? Oh no, not there. So this front part till here, that's one. You go on to that end, that table. That back side, yes. 2 on that end. You lovely people will form 3 on this side. And then, who does not feel like they're in a group? Here. Right? I said do not judge. Okay? So this back group. Front, you're on this side. So we have 30 seconds. Please just go into a space. Can you give the instruction? Group 1. Okay. We are in an ecosystem space, and so we really want to think as part of the ecosystem. What can we do collectively? Okay? And your 10 minutes begin now. We have 2 minutes. Some 2 minutes. Let's put our final thoughts together. We want to move to the individual, okay? And so what we want to focus on is the question on the screen, because this is what we are putting on our commitment wall. What is that one bold change? Please note the words bold, meaning you want to get out of your comfort zone and do something different. And change, meaning it may be something new, it may be uncomfortable, but we want to give it a try. So let's just take some time to reflect on that. Wow, we have takers. Okay, so you'll share the minute. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Okay, let's start here. Then I'll.
Society actors specifically in very many counties within Kenya. So we want them to take their individualized interventions by themselves. So when they do that, eventually we are all contributing to.
Chairman of East African Philanthropy Network, and my commitment on the board is that I will champion long-term giving and the building of endowments by all who benefit from the riches of this continent.
My name is Ronnie Tusingwide. I work for the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Alliance Uganda, and my commitment is to trust my community more. My community is their organizations, because we are a consortium, and often at times you find that we are competing for the same grants, for the organizations within the alliance, and then you find the need to hide some information because you don't want to give out these things and people are going for your grant. So I'm making a commitment to trust them more and immerse myself with them so that we can think, create together, and hopefully bigger and better things will come for us. Yeah.
Je suis Modestine Etoui.
Modestine Etoui est mon nom. Is my name.
Et je viens de la RDC.
She comes from DRC.
Et je travaille pour une organisation dénommée Agir RDC.
She works for an organization in RDC working with displaced population.
Alors, qu'est-ce que je vais devoir améliorer? Parce que nous le faisons déjà, c'est par rapport à l'engagement communautaire.
One thing that we need to do more, not that we're not doing it at all, but my commitment is to do more, is about community involvement.
Donc c'est de pouvoir communiquer sur ce que font nos communautés. Le rapport est tellement grand et vraiment je suis édifié de comment on doit en parler dans nos success stories, pourquoi pas.
So her commitment is to make the community contribution more visible, because she's really amazed at how much they do and how much they provide, and this needs to be more visible even in the reports and things that the organization puts out.
And thank you to the plenary for sparring the conversation. And as we said, this is not the end. This is a continuation of the conversations that we hope we can continue to have. Team to give me guidance. I think where we had breakfast, I think. I'm lying. Okay. Welcome to our afternoon session where we are getting into the full action. So one of the things I'm going to ask is we should occupy the spaces closer to the middle. So in Africa, where we used to have nice, and we still do, the traditional fire spaces, where we used to, I hear that, I can hear the I've taken people all the way back. For those who are in urban areas, I've taken you nicely into the rural spaces where we enjoy going home. And the joy of sitting around the fire was that there were amazing conversations that used to happen, okay? And that's what we want to depict this afternoon, is that we want to have a conversation that help us to really get into that space, okay? And since you are on time, I want you to occupy the prime spaces. So please move closer, okay? I would like us to fill the first 2 rows.
Hello, everyone. We need some fire here because we're not warm in the front. This is a very, I was just telling the team here, we organizations to be disruptive, and then when you're disrupted, it's uncomfortable. Because I'm presenting in a circle, and I've never done that. So my name is Wamboi. I work with Mama Hope, an organization that supports locally led organizations, very small, tiny, upcoming organizations with system strengthening. And everyone here will introduce themselves. I'm just going to give you a run through of our session. So we're going to have a quick introduction by each of the facilitators on what they'll be handling for the afternoon. And then we'll have Vincent come and tell you about the overall framework we're using for the afternoon and the different thoughts. And then we'll break into groups where we need everyone to really participate, because what we are doing today is trying to figure out how we design resilient institutions, especially in the face of everything in the world. I don't even want to point to one thing. Everything seems to be happening right now. So how do we design not just our institutions, the institutions we work with, our allies, how do we design resilient institutions? So we really, really need to show up today, because I think each and every one of us can learn from everyone else. So I'm going to ask you to remove the beautiful book that you were given in the morning, the nice notebook. It was not for gifting someone else. Remove it because we have a question that we need you to really think about, and we'll ask it again at the end of the session. Or some people already gifted the book. People are looking. There's a notebook. Here's the question we need you to really think about. When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks inside that organization? When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks? When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks? So that's a question we kind of need you to meditate upon through this session. Okay? You've written, you know. I'm like, do you want me to repeat the third word? Yeah. Can anyone, just 3 people, since you started thinking, can I disturb you in your thoughts? What comes to mind? What's the first thing that breaks when funding crisis happens?
At the systems. Yeah. In terms of, I'm going to be specific with operations. Yeah.
Operation breaks?
I've been seeing the structure shaken. Most of the staff are gone home, especially those in programs directly engaged with the community.
My name is Kevin. So apart from the staffing issue, I think we'll have a problem with facilitation, mobility, and also, outreach if you are now going to go to the programs within certain localities.
It's interesting. Operations. Who has just arrived? I feel like there's been an influx. Okay. Remove your notebook and write this question for thought. When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks inside the organization? Who else is new? Just come in. So we're just going to use that question. Keep it in mind, okay? So I'll bring Vincent in to introduce us to the framework of this afternoon.
Thank you, Omboy. Hello, everyone. My name is Vincent Mwangi. I work with Mama Hope alongside Wamboi. And thank you for showing up to this session. And we are hoping that we can come up with some learnings out of it, because this is all about a space. This is a space of learning and co-creation. Oh, can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. So I was saying, I'm going to talk about is the needs-based. There's a needs-based and there's the asset-based. So the needs-based approach is more of like when you have shortage of resources in your organization and you're looking at it from the needs that your organization has. Let's say, for instance, you're experiencing some shortage in funding. What are some of the things you'll do immediately? You'll start thinking about, should we hire a fundraiser, right? What are some of the things we need to, when you're talking to a donor, let's say you are a donor and I'm using a needs-based approach, I'll be telling you, kids are starving in my organization. I'm just giving an example. And so we need this amount of money to do X, Y, and Z, right? So we are looking, or rather we are approaching the work from a needs-based point of view. And as my colleague was introducing this session, we were talking, there's this concept about being disruptive. So many times our organizations, or those of us who are working in communities, we also need to, we're talking about a shift in the development sector, but we also need to think about how are we also as communities positioning ourselves as people who are bringing in value into this work. Because most of the times, we are always looking at this work from a donor's point of view, that because I have the resources as a donor, I'm the only one who can call the shots, quote unquote. But for you, think of it in this way. For you, for this work to happen, I need your organization, if you work at the grassroots level, for my vision as a donor, for instance, to be achieved. And so that's where the asset-based community development model comes in. Our communities are very rich in resources. What are some of the things we can look into our communities and utilize them in ensuring that we're building resilience? And this is something we've seen with so many organizations that have used this approach, whereby for them investing in the systems that already exist in their communities, there's always a ripple effect, because when you invest in that teacher who went to your local school, instead of waiting for an outside volunteer to come into your organization, you're already investing into knowledge and the foundation in your community.
We're going to discuss an asset, data as an asset, social entrepreneurship or enterprise as an asset, and the private sector as an asset, and finally, community as an asset. And, well, I don't know how many of us here are philanthropists or funders or implementing partners. It doesn't matter. You still, even as a funder, you still have a community. You can still tap into the community of your partners and grantees. You can still use data. You can still think about ways to boost social enterprise for your grantees. So this is not, oh, this is just for, implementing partners. We all have community. How do we, the people in this room right now are community, right? So when you're networking, you're not networking from a needs-based, I need to meet you so you give me money. If I work from it from an asset-based, I'm like, how can we work together, right? So let's have that in mind. So I'm going to introduce Lucy. She'll take over from here and tell us a brief discussion about, a brief highlight of what data is about, then Modern, and then Ingrid, and then we'll be divided into those 4 groups. Yes? So data, social enterprise, private sector, and community. Yeah.
Thank you, Ambui. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we've just had lunch, so it's a very hard time to have a session, but we will try. So yeah, my name is Lucy Joe. I work for a consulting firm called Real Time Insights. At Real Time Insights, we work with non-profit sector to help in rethinking and coming up and designing new strategies. So basically we support fundraising. So in terms of fundraising, thinking through how do we remain resilient also, but also we support grant writing. So for today's session, as Wabui has mentioned, I'll be facilitating the session on data. And basically we are looking at data as an asset and how can we use data to help us to build resilient organizations. That's a big question we will be answering. Now, when we were starting, we had the question around what happens when funding crisis, to look at how we can use the data that we have to actually build resilient organizations, to actually turn, this can become a turning point for our institutions. So that's a kind of discussion we'll be having. And to help us discuss, we're looking at data, 3 ways. One, we look at data as a mirror to help us reflect about our organizations and our institutions. I think the challenge at times is actually be willing to see the truth, because we can look at ourselves, but we are not willing to see the truth, yeah? It can happen. You could be a cat, but when you look at the mirror, you see something different, yeah? So today the challenge is to look at ourselves and really introspect ourselves and see the truth. But also use data to help us in terms of detecting the warning signs. So looking at what are some of the indicators that we need to look at to be like a sensor system. Looking at some of the key areas, we'll look at the governance structures that we have, the decision-making structures within organizations. What are some of the indicators that tell us we're in the right direction, that we can be able to have a governance structure that gives us space to actually adapt. Because if you do not have a structure that gives us that space to adapt and change and come up with innovative ways of doing things, then we will keep just talking and talking and talking. So we have to look at the governance structures, we have to look at our accountability, trust, things that have been talked about a lot. But the key thing is, what are the indicators? Can we look at ourselves and see this is a warning sign? And I think if we continue on this trend, then we are not likely to end up well. So we need to take action now. And that's a third bit. It's where we look at data to help us to map out our next steps. So what are these indicators telling us? What can we do? What we do as an institution, what one organization will do, will be different from another organization. But that's the key question. Is at the end of the session, that each institution can actually see how they can, some of the steps they can take, some of the commitments that they can take moving forward based on their own data, based on their own reflection. So I want to welcome you to that discussion. At the end of it all, we will have a toolkit that we will develop as a team, with key indicators or with key ideas around data that can help us to really build resilient organizations. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
So I have this one and I have this one. Good afternoon. My name is Modern Karema. Very happy to be here. I have 2 quotes. On one hand, I lead the team at STAR Education. STAR is STIR Education in Uganda. It's an NGO, and we work in the education space in Uganda. On the other hand, I'm the founder and leader for Mentor Leadership Academy. Mentor is a civil society capacity development consulting group or advisory services team. And so on one hand, in my session, you'll be hearing a little bit of civil society in education and a little bit of consulting. And that lady is the one that lady there who is sitting there, is the one that leads the team at the Leadership Academy. So we are the two people that will be handling that session. Now, I just have one question. In the last 3 years, who has lost a grant? Lost a grant, yes. One funder closed. One of your funders closed. Stopped funding you. Hey, close the grant, that's what I mean. You can see you have many problems. Now keep your hands up. Of those whose hands are up, how many people had an internal revenue generating project that managed to fix the gap created by the funder closing the tap? So you see, that's issue one. For those that didn't put up their hands, for those that haven't lost a grant, how many of you, if a funder closed now, stopped funding you, how many of you have an income generating project that would fill the gap created by that project, that donor closing the taps? So you see the trouble we are in. Other than the chairman of EAPN, we all have problems, and him, and her. So that's what this session that I'm going to run is about. It's around social enterprise as an asset. How do you create an income revenue cash flow that whenever any funder closes, you don't find yourself in a situation where you have to cut your staff? Other organizations I've seen, you've been earning 5 million and now because this funder has closed, you go down to 1.5. Isn't that it? So how do you create another revenue that is yours that you can use to fill the gap so that you don't end up closing the organization? Very many organizations, by the way, closed because of USAID. Why? Because USAID was giving them 70-80% of the revenue. So how do you buffer yourself so that when that time comes, you don't have to close your organization? That's what my session is about. And I don't want to talk too much. My session will be just seated somewhere here. If you want to learn that, that's where I will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ingrid Kalangoire. I am Rwandan, and I work for Bank of Kigali Foundation. For those who are Rwandese, I'm sure you know Bank of Kigali, which is one of the biggest banks in Rwanda. And we are fairly new on the market. So BK Foundation has just been in existence for, I think this is our 3rd year of implementation. But when the foundation was created, we were created during a disruptive moment. You knew climate was becoming a huge thing. We had just come out of COVID. We were also, the shifts globally in terms of economic shocks, you could sense them. And so as a foundation, building resilience did not just start, in this now century. From the time we were born, it had to be built in our DNA. And so mine is to really talk about what is it that I'm learning from my sister companies. When I speak of my sister companies, I mean the BK group in general. So we have 4 profit-making companies which contribute to the foundation, and then we provide grants to communities that we support. But we also look for funding. So somewhere, yes, I have a long-term partnership, lifetime partnership with a bank, but on the other hand also, I need to show my own contribution. And so we're going to speak of some of the key things that we've learned from private sector. We are looking at governance, risk, performance, setting clear KPIs for your teams, making sure that by the time any risk comes around, you're able to resist. Mine is there's a few things that lead into what he was also going to speak of. And here, creating capital sovereignty. How do you build your endowment funds? How do you make sure that within the ecosystem that you have, and having an agile governance system that allows you to make certain policies possible for your own foundation, you're able to invest in certain platform investments, low-risk investments that can give you a return. But to do all of this, we say that sometimes non-profit, we are not allowed to do these things, but you really are. And partners can easily understand you, and you can have a strong, if your governance is very agile and very tough, they make it easy for you to stand on your grounds and say, look, if you're going to work with me, I'm going to put a 10% sustainability on top of the total budget. So that sustainability 10% is what goes into your endowment fund, etc. So you need to have a strong governance, agility in your organization, and then you eventually start growing and you become resilient over a period of time. So mine is going to speak of that mainly. So we'll be probably somewhere around here. So, thank you.
All right. The last cluster or group will be community. Mama Hope has a 17-year history of working with community-led organizations. And I think someone is here. One of our partners is here, if I'm not wrong. But yes, Tobias. So we're going to talk about your community as an asset. And not the people that you give to. I mean, that you take from, data, you take from them, different things. If you think about it, we really take a lot from our communities. The question is, how much are we giving back? And not through our work, right? But through being a member of that community. Does the organization show up for something as simple as weddings? Do you contribute to a funeral fundraiser? You know, are you in that community to live there? Or are you there to collect data, impact data and take pictures and send out? Are you a member of that community? And if you're truly a member of that community, when crisis hits, those are the first people who will come and volunteer when people leave. They're the same people who will show up for your programs when money has gone. They'll still show up, right? So the question is, how much are you investing in your community, right? As a member of that community, and then how will that build your resilience? What is that relationship going to do for your resilience? So that's a conversation we're going to have. And I wanted to stop at 3 sharp so that Susan can break us into groups. And then once we're done with the groups, don't worry, if you really wanted to attend all the sessions, we'll have a feedback session and you can ask questions. So that was the point of the introduction. So that later, if you want to further understand something, we can have that session after, and then we'll have a closing session after that. So, are there any questions? Did someone come in when we had started? Yeah, did anyone just come in after I gave a question that we are supposed to answer? I feel like I saw someone come in. Oh, the question is that we need you to write down, write down, unless you have a photographic memory. When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks inside that organization? When a funding crisis hits an organization, what's the first thing that breaks inside that organization? So think about that, join a group, and we'll discuss it at the end. And then if anyone joins, please give them the question, pass it along. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much. A round of applause to our panelists. That clap is a clap of, I am not so sure what is going on, but I will figure it out. Trust the process, okay? So what I'll ask the panelists to move into the 4 corners. And I think for you, you need to be at that corner. Literally move to the 4 corners. You told me you trust me with what I will do. Yeah. That corner is one. This is another corner. The panelists move first. So as we said, we are having a conversation around asset building. So we have the team on community. Okay. We have the team on, okay, let me go to social enterprise. We have the team on private sector here, and then we have a team on data. I needed someone there so that then we have a better way of spreading out. So can you move back there? Sorry. So that then we have a bit of a spread out of space. Community, you can move this way if you don't mind. And so the idea is we want you then to go into the different groups. And we are going to have deeper conversations on what has been raised, okay? Now, this is the thing. I want us to make sure, I told you, my fireplace has to still continue in those spaces. So we will limit you to at least 10 or 15 people, okay? So if choice number 1 has gone, please go for choice number 2. Trust us, we promise we are going to give you the feedback from the different teams, all right? So I'll just give us some 5 minutes to move. Please move with your chair if you can. There are some chairs on the outer side of the circle. Okay, I've seen where the interest is. We shall do a bit of a rotation. I'm going to spoil the program, Vincent, a little bit. This is for my facilitators. One boy. You can discuss. I know. Right? The fire is at its best, it's hot, then it starts simmering, and then suddenly grandma would say, it's bedtime now. You're like, no. That's what I've done to all of you, and I'm sorry. We want to light another fire here, okay? And we wanted to just bring it back all together. What are some of the commitments and actions we want to take, okay? And so with the team here, I don't know whether you did identify someone to do the, okay, it's okay. I'll ask each team to just share, and you have 5 minutes of fame. So whether it's you or your representative, it's fine. If you see me standing next to you, I'm just being conscious about everyone's time. And so who would love to go first?
Mainly on what are the things that we learn from private sector. And coming from a bank foundation, a corporate foundation, he was sharing what is it that they do best, and how can we approach them for them to meet us halfway. So some of the key takeaways was, number one, it's appreciating that the private sector exists and that some of them do support civil society organizations. Another one was understanding, a key takeaway was really deep diving into understanding who the private sector is that you're approaching, the language that you should use when you're speaking to them, right? If you know they don't work in environment, don't go speak to them about environment. They will not look at you a lot. But if you know they have an issue of environment and they need to reduce their carbon footprint, go propose, go give great proposals that give them a return on their investment that they will be making. And someone mentioned something interesting. It's no longer CSR, it's now CSI, corporate social investment, not corporate social responsibility anymore. We also understood that we needed to negotiate our deals. Even though you're going there as an NGO, you need to negotiate so that you're keeping either sustainability funding or either they're supporting you, giving you an in-kind, but negotiate your deal and don't be afraid to, position yourself well. And then really finding areas of complementary between the two, which kind of links it back again to thinking like a business so that you know how best you can position your proposal when you're approaching the private sector for sponsoring. Thank you.
We should engage them as partners, not just see them as donors. So, because you are supporting them in their mission, even as they are supporting yours. You are not just going there to beg for them to give you support. So, that mindset.
Maybe to add on what they have already said, I think we also agreed that when we are investing, we need to invest in low risk ventures And you also said we need to take advantage of the business environment. Like where you have AIs, we need to take advantage of them. And we need also to benchmark in order to see the best practice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. See, this is why you need to build the fire with more logs. And we are the logs of information. Okay.
As an asset, and we looked at 3 aspects. Social capital in terms of trust, I can't say this word, reciprocity and shared investment. Financial capital in terms of available revenue models, which touches very closely to social enterprise, but we talked about 2 aspects. And then human capital in terms of skills, knowledge, and leadership. In terms of social capital, we talked a lot about trust. How do you currently build trust within your community? And we said that you need to listen, like really listen, not listen to respond, not listen to solve, but listen to understand needs. And these needs may feed into the solutions you want to give. Nowadays it's called co-creating, but like listen and don't be prescriptive. Don't be prescriptive. And then fidelity to the shared plan. So if you come up with something with the community, you need to keep reporting back about progress, about challenges, so that they feel involved in the process, not just at the beginning and then, goodbye. One team member talked about how financial transparency, and especially if you're crowdfunding or fundraising from the community, and being able to come back to them and say, this is what we said we are going to do, this is how much we raised, and this is what it did. So being transparent, even though the money comes from the external. Under human capital, which looks into skills, knowledge, and leadership, we were asking questions around who in our community has untapped skills. And I like that someone shared that we always look at our community in the sense of volunteers. We get volunteers from the community, not team members, not executive directors, we need to change how we look at the people there. An example was given of an organization that relied heavily on foreign volunteers, and when COVID happened and they all went back, they were left hanging. But if you go to the local universities, people who want to do internships to learn something, people who actually maybe want to be in development as a career, are you building the capital, the human capital in your community? Are you giving them knowledge? Because they're the ones who will stay. They're the ones who know the people. Another example is using the community members to trusting them with a task. So one lady gave an example of the widows that they work with, tasking them with the M&E of going to other widows and talking to them and understanding needs. So not just that they're the recipients of the program or the work we are doing, but that they are involved in what Lucy would talk about, finding the data and analyzing the data and finding out what needs to be done. The last one was about financial capital. And yes, you can use social enterprise or private sector partnerships to have alternative revenue streams. But what about things that help you save costs? So we think about sustainability. We tend to think about it as extra money coming in. But what if you could save some costs because you've partnered with someone in a program, or you have grown food to feed the children in the school? You save some money. You're not buying the food at a high commercial rate. And then what you do with that money is it goes into a program. It goes into operations. It goes into hiring or actually paying a volunteer on the side of human capital. So yes, we can look at it as social enterprise, but there is cost saving that could help you, cost saving and partnerships that could help you be sustainable. So I don't know if, was that it? I hope that was it.
One of the things, or one overall theme that came out of our session was the importance of community buy-in. And if you look at all the aspects of resilience within the work that we do, community members supporting the work that we do, approving what we do. There's someone in our group who said sometimes we tend to think that the people in our ecosystem are only the participants in our programs. But there are those silent members, quote unquote, silent members in the community that have power, that are always untapped. What if we start looking at them as more of capital that will help us in building resilience within our work? So those are some of the things that came up out of our group.
Thank you very much. Again,
we talk about skills for the community to participate in development. We are looking at communities that some have been systematically marginalized over years, from colonialism to the present governments. So they have basically very limited skills, and I think we need to interrogate who bears the responsibility. That's one. The second perspective is who invests in the time and is patient enough, because skilling, and especially considering when you are working in contexts that are either fragile or, as I mentioned, marginalized systemically, then it takes time to build this capacity. Yet perhaps we are working with people who want to see results up. So I think that's something we need to reflect on even as we build a conversation.
Here in Rwanda, how we usually tap the expertise within the community, especially in our community work in Muganda. So we usually get some people who have some expertise, let's say in road maintenance, road engineers. Then they help us during the community work. They help us to do our feeder roads. So we use them, and the whole community participates. Usually, depending on the GBV prevention or management, or what we call Muryango. Then you have another structure that helps us in community hygiene.
Thank you for sharing. Final?
Because for us, we deal with within the care work industry, so we deal with domestic workers. So we have local groups that we have created sort of like hubs in various geographic locations. So we get to train those that will become trainer of trainers. So that even as much as we evacuate from that scene, they're able to actually capacitate the rest in perpetuity.
Thank you. Because we were provoked this morning, so we are still continuing. We have to end the day with provocation.
The community are not educated, skilled, don't have talents, don't have hobbies, don't want to volunteer, don't have time to do other things other than be community members. So just a provocation.
And also there's someone in our session who also talked about indigenous knowledge and how you're able to tap into that. So
I love the provocation, but this is how I want to respond to that question. We work with communities that were evicted from their ancestral homes, the forests. You have the Batwa, you have, even here in Rwanda or in Uganda, those communities used to live on hunting and gathering. That was their livelihood. That's all they know. That's what they are really skilled at. Now we've moved them out of their ancestral lands and put them at the periphery of the forests, and now asking them to do agriculture, to do business, to do all these things for survival. How do they transition from this type of livelihood to this other livelihood that they need to survive outside? So I think that is where some of the people here are talking about skilling. Yeah.
They need to know how to can the meat, how to salt it, how to preserve it, and sell it to us who don't know how to hunt. They don't need skills for farming. They were not farmers anyway.
So let's go to data. And I hope you can help us answer why. I was told, Susan, when you said data, people thought about maths, statistics. You traumatized people over what they did not want to do in their education, formal education.
All right. Thank you so much. So as data, we had a very small, intimate group over there. And when Lucy was starting, she asked, how is it that we can use data to build resilient organizations and cause a disruption in our organizations? I have to agree, the team members who were there, we were really disrupted. And when time was being told to stop, we were like, no. And I'll tell you why. So, of course, we started out very well. And the question we went to the bottom line of where it all starts, and how is it we are to measure our institution's health? How can we use data to help us measure and understand our institution's health? So, of course, we start with programmatic impact. We all understand that. What are you doing? How are you doing it, So So if it's your participants, are you meeting the numbers? If it's the projects, have you ticked? You have that table where this is what you need to do from January to December. So there we were flowing well. Next, we went into governance effectiveness. And here we are looking at, what kind of work are you doing? Are you doing your work within your mandate? What's your organizational structure? What does that look like? We had some great English being thrown in. We were looking at team to growth ratio. As a governance, if you've been doing the same thing for 10 years, come on, guys. So we continued well. Then now it started getting controversial. Because the first, So we started on capital and financial health. Again, different sources of funding. Is it restricted? Is it unrestricted? Is it a business? What does that look like? And then a question was thrown in. This is very good, but what about the local community contribution? And there was a case scenario highlighted about a community in Uganda, and we were like, okay, probably we need to be more inclusive on what exactly, when we are reporting on our financial health, what does that look like? Is it inclusive to our local environment? And I think all the assets are really reflecting that in the essence of how are we integrating what is locally available. And so we continued. So it went warm. It went warm for a while because we looked at the legal status and compliance. And we were like, so ideas came up, of course. And they're like, we are an NGO. We should make money. And then someone else gave us a case scenario. And they said, our policies don't allow us to make this money. I mean, it's in the registration and everything. So yes, you can have these brilliant ideas, but you have to comply to your legal status and how you've been registered. So of course there was that conversation there, and I hope all of us are just having that conversation in our minds. And I hope it's really challenging us, even in terms of data, then how do we present this to the government and in our different countries, probably offer, you can write papers and start visiting the offices and say we need change. And then now, we came to innovation and organizational growth. And I think that's the last discussion we had, because one of the key things we talked about is at what rate is the organization growing and adapting to change. A question was raised around digital upskilling. And of course, there was drama there too. Because the very old question that we are asking, who told you? Who told you they need that information? They want to know it. But what came out is those working in the rural community. Urban community, yes, we can talk about communities. In fact, someone said, there are people who still have computers with backs. Do you remember them? Sorry, do we know them? Oh, okay, as most of us know them, yes. And so the question was raised around, we are tackling communities that don't even have electricity. We are tackling communities that are not educated. And so even as we are collecting data as information and as an asset, let's localize our data to what is actually in our environments, and even to the donors, to the funders we engage in. Let them see our perception, because we are the kings. Our communities are the kings, and they know what they need. Thank you.
I feel like I'm watching episode 5, season 3 happening, and I'm like, wow. Thank you, data team. So anyone else from the data? Yes, I was even about to say, if you don't raise.
Thank you. There's something that we discussed, I think, longer, was the issue of human resource. That when we need to also measure our staffing skill sets, because every 5 years, NGOs do a strategic plan, and we focus so much on the programmatic bit. But we never measure whether the skills we have in the house can deliver the program that we are developing. Yeah, so we thought that we need not to ignore our staff. And of course, it also went very interestingly. There's a new word from my brother there that I learned, NPS, that we need to, first of all, even evaluate and measure the level of motivation within the staff. Many times it's not about money, but it is how am I appreciated in this organization. So sometimes we think upward growth, the salary reviews,
will motivate the staff. Sometimes it is beyond that. So we need to know what keeps a staff, what motivates a staff. So some of those things need to be measured, especially when you're measuring our programmatic impact.
We need to, reflect and really agree that some of these staff need to be let go. I know it's a very controversial issue, but some of them are gatekeepers who have remained in our organizations. You cannot bring any new idea as long as they're there, Yeah, so that's part of data. Yeah, so maybe just to conclude, I think, nutshell, I know there was a lot of controversy in that discussion. But I think bottom line is that as organizations, we really need to be sincere with ourselves. Programmatic, because even when we started the discussion, that was the obvious. We are very good M&E systems. We capture data. We all of us say we capture data, but we're missing out on the data that is most important in organization, and the data that we have to be bold enough to look at and make decisions and change how we do things. Yeah, so thank you so much. I think...
I said my work is to start the fire.
So first of all, they mentioned that in terms of data, so anytime we talk about inclusion, then the key question is, what are we doing at the point of design? Yeah, exactly, what are we doing at the point of design? So if we're saying today that the communities, so for any data that we're working on has to be inclusive, it's inclusive of what, right? If we are designing, then we need to have the same word that you use, integration. So we need to make sure that communities are integrated into that particular design before we do anything. The second area also is in terms of the data collection that you just mentioned. So like, for example, there's an example that someone gave in the morning that they went to collect data in Uganda. So the economist mentioned that they went to collect data at the border about some crossings that were happening regarding marketing, enablement and stuff. However, the partners were implementing were also training and facilitating the women in that particular community. The data did not capture that particular information. So then the key question is, what are we missing out in these data points at the point of collecting them? So we need to figure out a way that we are resilient, but we are also innovative and we are also accommodative to any other environmental factors that we get. Thank you.
Appreciating community data, right? And that's information, right? How are we looking at the information or the data to help us to with social enterprise? Because I realized all the chairs were dragged to that direction and had to politely put a stop to allow for Modern to have a good amount of people that he can have his conversation on. So I know you want to say something about data and then come to your session. I just know you only have 5 minutes.
I just wanted to annoy. Some little bit of oil coming from the group's sentence on you are going to the community and they are not educated. So my first question is, what is education? Number 2, why is it you that is educated? Number 3, you have come to my village, you have found me there, and it is you who is educated and it is me who is not educated. Who tells you you are educated and I'm not? So with all that, and I love this because it is merging both the data session and the community session, so we can. So I just wanted to annoy people, but can I go to the social enterprise? Do you go to social? So as I said at the beginning, I am an educationist, and you know all the countries that you work in are now doing CBC. And CBC has something called formative assessment. For that, one of my learners, because I was the teacher, tells us what they learned. Please, my learners, don't shame me. Is there any of my learners who would want to give a recap of what they learned?
So on the social enterprise, we started this very well because we didn't go directly into social enterprise. We looked at the broad perspective before going into the nuance. And we looked at the program implementation models. How you have different models that you can apply, and how all those models can be combined together to have a blended model. And some of these models are like the amplification model, direct implementation model, the social enterprise being one of them. So if I was now to come in at the social enterprise model, this is a business model that seeks to balance both revenue and as well as the social impact. And the good of that is that you are diversifying your revenue streams while also ensuring that you are covering yourself for potential risk in case one source of revenue was to dry. If you're only relying from one donor and the donor gets to close the tap, what happens? They also close down your water and you are going to die out of thirst. So in that case, looking for instance from a school perspective or from a hospital perspective, you would want to make sure that if you are running a hospital, you don't just make everything to be free. Collect minimal fee from the patient so that you are able to also meet the business expenses as well. And that social enterprise has an element of balancing two aspects. One is, how is it mission oriented? And number two, how is it system integrated? You can have a social enterprise that seeks to separate the two so that there is strong reliance on mission orientation, and you can also have one that is totally unrelated. So in this case, if you are a hospital, you can also start a hotel, so that even those people coming to visit the patients, when they sleep there, they're also able to reinvest that money to support the hospital itself. But you need to be careful to make sure that the management element of different entities, they are carefully defined, because then you have two different service provisions. Whoever is running the hospital might not be an expert in terms of running the hotel itself. So there is a careful balance in terms of the skill set as well. Number two, you need to think about the system integration. How close are the two? Are they interlinked? Can you share management? If, for instance, is a school, for instance, and in addition to having a school, you are charging school fees to the pupils, and you also start a youth empowerment program within the same school. So it means the teachers can continue to teach the youth empowerment program as well. So you have shared management and shared skill, shared workforce, and that way you are maximizing on the minimal revenue that you are able to collect as well. And through that integration is where you are looking at the embedded integration all the way to external integration. So the embedded is where you are looking at, they are very closely linked. The integrated is where they are partially, and the external one is where they are totally separated. And as we are closing on that, we could not fail to look at, when you are thinking about all these, you need to be very careful in terms of the setup of the business. And this was like my final input to this. When you are thinking about social enterprise, think about the business setup. Because for you to be able to, can I say, distribute that revenue, you have to apply the FRIS, the International Finance Reporting Standards, because then you cannot pick money from one business and just draw that money to another business without common controls. So the auditors must require that you consolidate your audit reports, either through having the same management, either having through the same ownership, but that has to be brought in together so that you are allowed to pick money from one of the business arm to the other business arm. I would like to pause there and ask for someone to add to that.
There's the term people like to use in our NGO world, beneficiaries. I understand now it's been changed to participants, right? For social enterprise, we use customers. You'll notice that any social enterprise, who are the target customers? Because remember, you're looking at it from a business point of view. So then the key question is, how do you set it up, right? So today, we are a traditional INGO, we're a traditional NGO. But now you want to move into social enterprise. Then what are those key ingredients that you need to put in? Are you doing a SWOT analysis for it? Or do you just take the management that you have from your NGO into the social enterprise? So that's one of the things that I just wanted to add. Then the last thing also, in terms of the integration models, the program implementation models, so they're actually 5, right? So There's direct implementation, which most of us are fully aware. You write a grant, you implement, and you have that. Then you have the amplified, where it's more like a sub-grant. There's an NGO who is good at fundraising, but you're on the ground, you're good at implementing. Then you have, of course, the social enterprise that is mentioned. We have the one that you call the systems model, where we leverage government infrastructure to implement. However, in that particular model, you'll not get any recognition for that particular work, or maybe partial recognition, but not as much as you'd want. And then also there's the virtual programming models, which include the likes of Facebook, social media marketing, all those. And then you have the blended programming. The key takeaway home from that program implementation model is you can choose any of those 5 except one. Which one? Anyone in the room who was not in the group, in that particular group, please tell us. Out of those, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 program implementation models that I've mentioned, you're safer at any of those 5 except one. Which one? Anyone in the room? You actually have a blended way of doing your activities. Thank you.
Our facilitator talked of think clearly about models that can outlive you. Which models, like he mentioned, direct implementation is not a model that can outlive you. Once the funding stopped, once the support stops, that means your programs die, your mission dies, something like that. So think of resilience for the organization and resilience for the impact of the organization under social enterprise. Then while our facilitator was concluding, he mentioned, get people who think business rather than NGO solely. So I realized, in fact, it was a question that I was going to ask him because it's a challenge that we are facing at our organization. We have a social enterprise fundraising arm, but we find that you are raising less money because most people are focused on NGO, and also the marketing of that arm is more like NGO based. That's why you can't outcompete people in the market that are doing the same thing. So I usually tell my people in the organization, I'm like, we have merchandise, we have t-shirts, bags, but you realize the same things we have, another business in the market, in the private sector has it, and they are doing so much marketing and making so much money. So why aren't we doing the same to make that money and put it back in our impact? So our facilitator talked of get people who think business rather than NGO solely. So this discussion really stamped my debate in the mind that I've always had, telling my team, you people, we need to work like this, and this is how we have to thrive, because competition is there and we can't really beat it or achieve what we need by only thinking as an NGO, yet we are operating a social enterprise for fundraising. So I feel like when I get back, I'm going to dismantle systems in the organization. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to sit down my team lead. I'm like, you know what, if we are really to work, if we to get to the level we want to get to as an NGO that is 13 years old now, we have to change the way we work. Yeah, so there is so much struggle on the mindset of what an NGO should operate and how a social enterprise should operate, and then finally, how do you integrate the two to make it work? So it was really a fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
Business acumen as non-profits. What is our acumen, and are we building our business mindset? Because that's very important. And what I'm hearing is, how do we use our mission to be able to help us to raise resources to further advance that mission? Yeah? And so having had all those conversations, I think it's critical for us then to come back and think about, then what are we committing to as individuals and as representatives of our organizations? Okay? And I want to hand it over to Modern just to help us then to close that conversation.
Thank you very much. Can you please clap for our facilitator for a job well done? And I'm happy that is ending on a very interesting topic of human resource and capacities. You have Cafe Javas in Kenya, or Java House? CJs, that's what you call it, CJs. If you're talking about skilling and your niche that you want is customer service, you can't be in NGO world we call it partnership management, isn't it? They call it customer service in their world. So you clearly cannot use an NGO person to develop a customer service model for a social enterprise. And the same applies to the group that Pamela was in. So think around, change the whole setup, and think business versus thinking NGO. So with all that land, do you remember what the theme of this whole session was? The model? We are together? When we started, he told you that all of us are dealing with ABCD, isn't it? But under ABCD, we had 4 different assets, isn't it? Which are these ones? Now, you have sticky notes with you. This is what we would want to hear now. 1, after hearing about data and hearing about community and hearing about social enterprise and hearing about private sector, question 1, what is that one learning that you would want to adopt? Learning. You've had everything that the 4 assets have discussed. What is that one learning that you have got with all the 4 put together? That's the first one. We've got it? So just write the word learning. That's issue 1. Okay? Issue 2. What is your bold action after having that learning? So point 2 is action. Bold action. Yeah, it's very important. Underline bold. Caps lock. So the first one is learning. The second one is bold action that you're going to do outside this room as a result of the learnings that you have got. We are together there? Number 3, which is the last one. Where do you need more support? Where do you need more support for you to take on what you have learned from this session? Or which support do you need? And it could be in any of the 4.
My learning is that building resilience and sustaining organizations is crucial and most important now more than ever. And 2, the bold decision is to kickstart the social enterprise for my organization, and the support that I need is to fine-tune the social enterprise, and especially the business model, the draft business model that I have.
Thank you. Any other? You want to share with us? Yeah.
The learning today is that we cannot continue doing business as usual. And the bold action I'll take is to evaluate the current models in my organization and to inform alternative financing. And then the support I need is to rethink data and social enterprise.
Thank you. Any other? Any other sharing? Yeah. I want us to thank ourselves, but also thank the facilitators of the 4 assets. The way we shall thank the facilitators is by answering the question we started with. Do you remember the question we started with? I told you adult education is not easy. The question we started with, where did we start from? When crisis, we are together now? That question. What breaks first inside the organization? When a funding crisis hits an organization, what breaks first inside? After learning all these things, do you have the answer to that question? Do you have clarity around that question? Or have we confused you the more? Because that one is also very possible. You can teach for 2 hours and learners are back to square zero. So after going through these 4 assets, have you got the answer to the question we started with? Not just the answers to that question, but also the solutions to the question we started with. We are together now. She's asking, and this one is just to annoy, do things have to break? So, the second part is now thanking ourselves for participating, and we shall thank ourselves by doing what we call the love clap. Do you know the love clap? So, let me teach you that.
I love that. Okay, yeah, there's video, so you cannot deny that you did that. Oops.